And we're live.
Thank you. We'll call this meeting to order then. I'm assuming the clerk has taken attendance.
The roll has been taken.
Thank you. I'd just like to remind the committee and our viewing public of a few procedural rules for virtual meetings to operate as efficiently as possible. All members will be muted for the meeting to reduce feedback. All web cameras for committee members shall be turned on to ensure to track quorum. Staff will be requested to join the video meeting should the need to answer questions and members of committee arise. Any member of committee should indicate they wish to speak by pressing the raised hand button at the bottom of the screen. Clerk staff will lower the hand when you have been recognized by the chair for your speaking opportunity. In the event a connection service interruption occurs that affects quorum of the committee, we may recess the meeting for up to 15 minutes to regain quorum. If quorum is not achieved, the meeting will be adjourned. All members of committee participating by online video conference will vote using eScribe, and the clerk will announce the vote results. Members of the public who registered as delegates are now able to take part electronically via webcam or via telephone for the meetings. All rules for delegations under the city's procedural bylaw continue to apply. Are there any committee members that have a declaration of conflict of interest? Seeing none. Separate items. Members of the committee, are there any budget reports, items for consideration or consent items that you wish to separate for discussion purposes? Councilor Carpenter, I think I saw your hand flash on several times, so I'll let you go first.
Thank you. 5.22 capital projects.
5.2.2?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, you're a little broken up there. I was having a little trouble. Councilor Vanderstel. You need to unmute yourself.
My apologies. 5.2.1, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
And Mayor Davis.
5.1.1.
Okay. And I want to separate 5.3.2. Okay. 5.1.1 is automatically separated. Is there a delegation and staff presentation? And I have a mover for all items for consideration and consent items not separated for discussion purposes. Councilor Vanderstel, seconded by
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I had one more separation. My apologies.
Yeah.
5.3.4.
Okay. So items for consent and consideration not separated, moved by Councilor Vanderstel, seconded by Mayor Davis. Any questions, comments? We'll call the roll. Call the vote.
So just prior to the vote, to confirm the items subject to the vote are as follows. Item 5.3.1, 2021 second quarter variance report. Item 5.3.3, quarterly status report of contracts awarded, and the minutes.
Okay.
Okay, and items not separated for discussion purposes carries unanimously on a recorded vote. Those voting in favor, Mayor Davis, Councilor Vanderstel, Councilor Martin, and Councilor Carpenter.
Okay, thank you. We have one delegation on today's agenda. I'll ask James Popham and Matthew Arp from Wilfrid Laurier University to come forward to speak to item 5.1.1 regarding the 2022 city budget public engagement campaign. Please state your name and address and speak to the item. You have 10 minutes inclusive of questions from committee.
Starting now.
Go ahead.
My apologies. Yes, thank you very much. I'm James Popham. I am a resident of the city of Waterloo, but I am associated with Wilfrid Laurier University's Brantford campus and have been working in partnership with the city of Brantford on a number of subjects over the last several years. Recently, I was approached by the CAO of the city, along with Maria Viscotti, about reviewing the survey that was made available through the Let's Talk Brant platform, asking citizens to provide their input about the budget itself and what they felt should be prioritized by the city. We had a look at the budget survey from a pragmatic standpoint, really looking for two things. One, the methodology that was used, and two, the recruitment strategy that was used. As a result, we came up with a series of recommendations that have been presented to the city. I just wanted to briefly introduce you to a couple of the ideas and then open the floor for any questions or conversations that you might have. My colleague, Matt Arp, who is in attendance, has also played a major role in coming up with these recommendations. So generally, as you may be aware, the survey asked a series of questions on what the public might think about different budget issues. We noted that there were several really good strengths within the design. First, collecting postal code data so that we had an indicator of what neighborhoods were being represented or communicating their thoughts. Two questions relating to satisfaction for value and taxes. I really believe that direct engagement in democratic processes like this are of great value to the public. And third, consistency in data collection. That is, this survey has been repeated over several years, so you have a little bit of an opportunity for longitudinal analysis. With that being said, we did notice that there were a series of questions that could be strengthened to get a better sense of what the public was saying and increase the veracity of the stories that come from this data that is collected. So these include things like having a more robust section for personal demographics, creating somewhat more interactive scales. So for example, you may be familiar, councillors and mayor, with the idea of game theory. This is the idea of using some of the mechanics that come with board games and video games and so on to engage people a little bit more actively in different decision-making processes. And we also recommended just improving some of the language around the questions to be in line with current academic practices. So this is fairly straightforward stuff like making use of Likert style question scales. The second point that we raised then was questions about the engagement and recruitment strategy, namely as an open and accessible survey. There was no real targeted recruitment strategy employed. That is, people who navigated to the Let's Talk Brant platform were able to provide their feedback, but there was no real no means for assuring that this is a representative sample of the citizens of Brantford who are responding to these questions. And so our recommendation was that a more thorough approach to recruiting people, either via a telephone style survey or targeted online survey panels, be employed. We have also provided a little bit of information about potential future opportunities or avenues for inquiry. That I think is something that can be discussed at a later stage. With that, I'll end my presentation and happily answer any questions or comments that you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? No, seeing none.
Yeah, I guess I got a question. So, well, this is very interesting. So this, in essence, you're going to be doing polling. Is that formal polling or?
That's correct, Lord Mayor.
Yeah. But at the same time, we'll still do the traditional, I think they call them monkey surveys.
The Survey Monkey platform, sir?
Yes.
Yes. I'm not sure which platform the city of Brantford currently uses. There's a couple of different solutions out there. As a whole, yes, I think it's important to make it openly accessible for people to provide their answers without having to worry about being the one selected or getting the nod to answer. But we do want to bear in mind that that approach to sampling people can lead to skewed data. So
Right.
that would be ancillary information.
So when we eventually receive the report, Doctor, will you blend them together or will you separate them? This is the data obtained using your traditional survey technique, and this is what we obtained using the more polling-like technique.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you, Mayor, sir. My recommendation here would be that for the online, the openly accessible one, it collect qualitative data so people can offer more descriptive feedback about their thoughts or opinions. Whereas we use a more traditional polling style for, say, a telephone survey or a web panel style survey.
Right. And how are you going to do that in terms of questions? Because we did refine our online survey by asking people to participate in a budget-like exercise, and they had to adjust numbers and to try and simulate what a real budget process is like. How will you be trying to duplicate that in a poll, or like, just what will the questions be that you'll be asking?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So were we to go forward with a telephone survey, that certainly would have to be reimagined. One option might be to work through with the respondent to say you have X number of points that can be attributed to each of these categories, and then they can weigh them according to what are most interesting to them with that level in mind. If we were to use a web-based approach, such as web-based panels, that can be a lot more flexible. So for example, one of our recommendations was to have the two different dials connected. So say you decided that you wanted to see greater services from the city of Brantford, by default, then the tax rate dial, for lack of a better descriptor, would automatically go up, so that you couldn't inform the city, say, yes, I'd like all the services in the world, but I don't want to pay any taxes for them.
Right. Well, I'll be very interested in seeing the survey results, because that's always, as you know, been a criticism of that. What we've been using is that it can be skewed and it can be, manipulated to some degree. So it's, well, it'll be interesting seeing what it does and just how much different it might be to what we get through our traditional techniques.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and thank you for working with us. I know you worked with us in respect to our downtown outreach team, and your report, I think, was instrumental in obtaining the funding that we now have for continuation of that outreach team. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, Councilor Carpenter.
Yes, thank you for doing this. This is great to have a outside look. Now, a lot of it is depending upon the questions. Will people have to identify themselves? Because and Let's Talk Brantford, people have to identify themselves, and a lot of people are reluctant to do that, with the sign in. So will your approach be different than that?
Through the Mayor, Councillor, the challenge here is the question of what they mean by identifying themselves. Certainly this can be collected relatively anonymously with information such as postal code data. I don't think that there is a necessity to collect, say, a person's name or actual physical address.
Yeah, because Let's Talk Brantford, you've got to sign in, and that identifies you. So I think there's a lot of reluctance to do that, unless, of course, you're speaking really positive about what's going on. And so that's kind of skews what Let's Talk Brantford actually does. So I'm glad to see your outside view on this, and I look forward to the results. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor.
Councilor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Chair Martin. Through you to James. I've been noticing a trend away from people being comfortable with the telephone conversation. It seems more and more that a survey or a text format communication or email communication seems to be much more prevalent, at least in the people that I'm dealing with in the Ward 1. Are you finding the same thing, James, that people are more hesitant to pick up the phone and have a person-to-person survey? And additionally, do you find that there's a comfort level in getting postal codes from them as well, in your experience?
Through the chair, thank you for the question, Councillor. That's an interesting methodological concern. It is something that has been addressed in many of the social sciences and disciplines. Compared to, say, conducting a survey in the times before the internet or mobile phones, so anything before about 1995 or so, we do not see the same level of participation, certainly from people who receive phone calls. With that being said, recent studies have indicated that somewhere around 20 to 25% of people receiving phone calls can reliably be expected to answer and provide their input. Many of the polling firms out there, including the one that I frequently work with, actually have access to multiple different avenues for collecting contact information. So we're not just calling landlines, for example. This does include mobile telephones as well. With that being said, there are certainly other options that are available. The challenge here being that different options and newer technologies scale with cost, but certainly text-based or internet-based surveys are an option here.
Okay, thank you very much. I look forward to the results. Thank you for your help so far.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We've gone a little bit over the time, so you're welcome to watch the rest of the meeting. We'll be dealing with this item first.
Thank you, Chair.
And with that, can I have a mover and a seconder to put the separated items on the floor? Mayor Davis, Councillor Vanderstel. Thank you. And I believe we have a presentation for 5.1.1. Go ahead, Maria.
Thank you, Chair Martin. Through you, Maria Visaki, Director of Communications and Community Engagement. Thanks for the opportunity to provide a synopsis of the report and the recommendations before you this evening with respect to this year's 2022 City Budget Priorities Engagement Campaign. Next slide. As we do every year prior to the budget process, this presents a really significant opportunity for us to educate residents about the city budget process, which at times can seem intimidating to members of the public. So it gives us an opportunity to put things into plain language and help people understand the way in which the city budget is developed, as well as the challenges that the Estimates Committee faces in terms of trying to balance providing and maintaining, and in some cases having to enhance current city services while mitigating the financial impact on citizens. So having the opportunity to be able to explain the challenges of that balancing exercise is always a really important opportunity for us. It also presents an opportunity for us to provide information and insights to help inform the decisions that the Estimates Committee has to make with respect to the 2022 city budget. And each year we really try to improve upon what we did the year before, learn from lessons in terms of what worked and what didn't, and what we could do better. And you've already seen an example of some recommendations we're putting forward this year to improve the process through Professor Popham's delegation. Next slide. The first recommendation of the report is to renew the license for the Let's Talk Brantford platform. I think council would agree that we've built some pretty impressive equity in this platform over the last 8 months or so. We started, the platform launched on January 12th earlier this year. And since then, communication staff have used this platform to develop 33 community engagement campaigns in that time. And between January 12th and September 8th, 19,681 respondents have provided feedback using this platform. which we think is a very significant number. And in speaking with the vendor, they're telling us that this participation rate is well above average compared to other like-sized municipalities. Next slide. Just a quick reminder of the tools that are available to us on the Let's Talk Brantford engagement platform. We have a forum that acts similar to a social media feed where people can engage in dialogue with both city staff as well as other members of the community. We do have a survey tool that is built within the Let's Talk Brantford platform. So when we are doing an engagement campaign on LTB, we do not actually use SurveyMonkey. We use the survey software that is built into this particular platform. And it does have some checks and balances that SurveyMonkey doesn't have. So we try to use this one as much as possible. There's a places tool that we've used when we're asking people to engage about where certain amenities should be in terms of actual locations. There's a quick poll, there's questions, there's FAQ, there is a number of different ways in which we engage depending on what it is that staff who have briefed us on the requirements of the engagement campaign in terms of what their objectives are. We tailor the tools to meet their objectives. Next slide. As Dr. Popham so eloquently explained prior to my presentation, we have engaged Laurier Brantford Research in trying to up our game, trying to approach the quantitative survey analysis and data with a more professional subject expert approach. We certainly know a lot in my staff and I in terms of collecting data and analyzing the data that we receive through the platforms that we use. We are not professional researchers though, and we do not have the capacity or skill set to employ the telephone survey approach, the specific, simple, random sampling methodology, which takes a lot more resources in order to achieve. And so we reached out to Laurier so that we could use the expertise that they have and their knowledge of the community in order to enhance and improve the validity of the quantitative analysis data. And as Dr. Popham referred to, while the tools that we have are very effective, they do require that people voluntarily complete the survey or voluntarily provide feedback. And that can skew the data to only those that have access to a computer device. And so to make sure that we are as inclusive as possible, we would very much like to be able to employ this SRS approach this year as part of our campaign. Next slide. So the benefits of this integrated approach is that we will still offer convenient ways for people to engage online and to volunteer their input on their own time. But we'll also be enhancing our methodology by introducing simple random sampling measures to improve the validity. And with that, we can guarantee a more diverse and inclusive participant group. The other benefits of this approach is that there would be no financial impact to the city if council approved this recommendation, as funding was previously approved for public engagement in conjunction with professional researchers, and we would be accessing that funding for this exercise. Next slide. With that, happy to answer any questions of the committee.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Seeing none, I guess you covered everything well in your presentation. Thank you very much. Okay, Mayor Davis, you asked for this one to be separated. Did you have any comments you wish to make, or was things covered with the presentations?
It was covered with the delegation presentation.
Okay, seeing no other questions or comments, we'll call the question.
Item 5.1.1, 2022 City Budget Public Engagement Campaign carries unanimously on a recorded vote. Those voting in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Vanderstel, Councillor Martin, and Councillor Carpenter.
Okay, that brings us to 5.2.1. Councillor Vanderstel, you asked.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you two, I would guess it would, did I see Marlene's name here? I'm not sure I did. I'm not sure who I'm asking this question of. Just a quick question though. When is the next time that we could apply for more supportive housing funding, and how often can we apply for that in addition to what we already have on Marlene Avenue? The reason being, it's highlighted through the downtown task force that there may be a greater need than we are supplying right now. So I'm just wondering if there's any news that you can give us on that.
Deb Schlichter, Acting Director Housing. I can, through Chair, I can try to answer that. We were fortunate to be able to access this Home for Good funding through the province through a special call. And it was one-time funding, but I know that they have reviewed the program and they are interested in exploring whether they'll do another similar type of call in the future. They're looking at supportive housing across all ministries. So Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care, Ministry of Community and Social Services, everybody has some type of supportive housing. So I'm hopeful that there will be another call in the future. What we're trying to do is be prepared for when a call like that happens, that we are ready to respond. Thank you.
Okay, so as our numbers increase, or as we become more aware of our numbers and our needs, we can bring that to the table as well, correct? Thanks,
Yes, we can.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions or comments? Oh, Councillor Carpenter.
Yes, thank you. Deb, is this your, I'm just a little confused here about applying for funding from Marlene Ave. Marlene Ave is already built and funded, is it not? So why would you be applying now?
Through the Chair, I believe the question that was asked about future supportive housing opportunities, Marlene Avenue, as you are stating, is correctly already funded. It has full funding. I think the question was regarding if we could do additional supportive housing, where would we get that funding from?
Okay, because the title says authorization to apply for Ontario Ministry for Lands Corporation for long-term financing for the supportive housing project at Marlene Avenue site. Are you talking about building another one at that site?
Yeah, I
If
think,
I could jump in, actually, Deb. So
yeah, the infrastructure funding, you can report.
Correct. So prior to the build on Marlene Ave, Council did approve debentures to be a partial source of funding for this project. So we've been cash flowing it until now. The project is complete. We know exactly how much we need to debenture. We do need to go to OILC, the Ontario Infrastructure and Lands Corporation, to receive that debenture, and that's the application that we're seeking now.
Okay, so the money that we've been flowing to, where's it been coming from? It's coming from a capital reserve?
Yeah, yes, exactly. Through you, Mr. Chair. You know, we always end up in these situations with debentures where we're trying to fund them at the end of the project, and we do have work in progress capital dollars on hand at all time that are typically sufficient enough to see us through until we know exactly the amount we need to debenture at the end of the project. In the event where we weren't able to do that, we would have sought interim financing, interim capital financing through another arrangement, but that was not needed.
Okay, so this capital reserve, what capital reserve did we fund it from?
It's really just our pool of work in progress capital dollars. So when we look at our accounts on a fund basis, we have our reserve funds and we have our operating fund and we have our capital fund, and our capital fund holds all of the dollars we've got allocated to all of our open capital projects currently. And of course, not all of those dollars are being utilized at any one point in time. And we've just been fortunate enough to have that pool available to cash flow until now.
We borrow from that pool, and if we don't get the funding, then what happens? Then we have to debenture it ourselves.
Yes, in this particular case, because the province will be funding the servicing on this, we would need to go through to another external lender to apply. But we do have a good working relationship with OILC and do most of our external borrowings from them.
Okay, thank you. That's the clarification I was looking for. Thank you.
Yeah, to be clear, this is to set up the debenture for this project. This isn't a grant application.
That's correct, Chair.
Okay. Seeing no further questions or comments, we'll call the question.
Is it popping up on your iPads? It is? Okay,
Yeah,
sorry. I'm just
yeah,
having a bit of a,
I voted already.
okay, I'm just having a bit of a glitch on my end. Just give me 1 second.
I was able to vote in the affirmative as well.
Well, while staff iron that out, why don't we do a show of hands? All in favor? That carries unanimously. Brings us to item 5.2.2. Councillor Carpenter, you'd requested this one.
Thank you. Just the staff, these items have all been built already. This work's already been done. We're just looking to debenture this and take it in-house.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that is correct. So the report is twofold. Again, we're seeking to debenture some projects that were already approved for debenture, partial debenture financing by council a couple of years ago. They're now complete. We're going to issue that debenture. Our investment group within the finance department is going to purchase that internally. And then the second part of the report identifies 3 other projects where council did approve debt financing originally. However, reviewing our reserve and reserve funds, there are sufficient sufficient funding today that we can just go ahead and cash flow those right now out of those specific reserve funds and not issue debt at all.
Now, when we're using that, there's sufficient funds. What could you give us the committee a report on how much funds are available? Because you're using these funds from sufficient funds that we already have in reserve. So can you give us this committee a report on, not right now, but maybe at the next meeting, about what funds are available and what funds we have that are flexible like this?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. They're actually not general funds. They are very specific reserves and reserve funds that are being identified. They are on page 5 of the report or page 22 of the agenda for tonight. So we are seeking, instead of debt financing for these projects, that for the Ash Grove street lighting conversion projects, we instead access our engineering minor capital as well as our federal gas tax reserve. It is eligible for federal gas tax funding. So the forecasted balances after these transfers are made are indicated in the table on page 5.
And that's the total balance of all available flexible reserve accounts, or just these 4?
Just these 4. There is another report, however, on tonight's agenda, the Reserve and Reserve Fund Quarterly Update, and the appendix to that report does identify all of our current reserves and reserve funds and the forecasted balances to the end of the year.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to,
You muted yourself again, Councillor.
sorry, through you to Selby, I believe. The landfill gas deficit, environmental services, page 30, the 103,750. I'm trying to relate this to what I read last year. I think we started breaking even, Selby, on that project where it was we were out of the red and into the black. And then I see two things happening at the same time in this report. The one is the deficit of 103, but then there's also the expansion of the gas system into, I guess, the new area in D2. So are we overall, are we realizing a profit from the gasification at the landfill, or we're still kind of on the edge?
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Selby, sorry, I'm sorry to cut you off. Just before, I just want to clarify with the clerk and the chair that this isn't the current report that we're on, in case there is some confusion here right now.
Oh, I thought it was 540.
Just to clarify, we're currently on item 5.2.2 capital project financing update and direction.
That's where I thought I was. My apologies. I can come back to it. Thank you.
Seeing nothing further on 5.2.2, we'll call the question. Are we going to try eScribe again, or should we just do a show of hands?
It seems to be up and running, so I'm gonna open it to voting right now. Just waiting for Mayor Davis and Councilor Carpenter.
It won't take my vote.
Okay, how would you like to vote, Mayor Davis?
Yeah.
In the affirmative?
Yes, in the affirmative.
Okay. And Councilor Carpenter, are you experiencing the same issue?
Yes, it's still on the previous vote. It hasn't been cleared yet.
Okay,
So yes.
you'd like to vote in the affirmative for this one? Okay. Okay, so item 5.2.2 capital project financing update and direction is carried on a recorded vote. Those voting in favor, Mayor Davis, Councilor Vanderstel, Councilor Martin, and Councilor Carpenter.
Okay, thank you. I'd ask for 5.3.2. This is the return on investment report, I believe. Yeah, semi-annual investment report. And what I like about this report is table 3 clearly shows that the best returns we get are when we buy our own debentures. And that's something I've been asking for some time. And we saw that in 5.2.2, that we're able to do that on a lot of projects. And clearly it's our best return. So I'd like to thank staff for doing that. And I hope you will look at doing more of that. The more of our own debentures we buy, the better off we are financially. Any other questions or comments on that item? Seeing none, we'll call the question.
Okay, you guys still, okay, so in fairness to all members, since it's not coming through to their iPads, why don't we all do a simultaneous show of hands? So it's fair. So those voting in favor, sorry guys. Okay, those opposed? The item is carried unanimously.
Okay, 5.3.4, Councilor Vanderstel. This is one you asked for.
I did. Thank you very much. Okay, in point 9 under analysis, there's 25 different DC reserve accounts. Could committee be supplied with how that breaks down, the 25, how they break out into categories?
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair, there is an appendix to this report, and all of those developer contribution or obligatory reserve funds are the first ones identified.
Oh, okay, okay,
so-
okay. I missed that. Sorry, my apologies.
Yeah, so there are a lot of them. So 1 to 14 are the ones we've had for quite some time, when we only had citywide DCs, and then we've had a number added just since April with the passing of the area specific
Okay,
charges.
all
as
right.
well.
Thank you so much, Joelle. I appreciate
You're
that. Thank you.
welcome.
I missed that. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Okay, that brings us to the end of the items separated. We have no resolutions, no notice of motions. Do members of the committee have any questions? Councilor Carpenter.
Thank you. Offhand, do you have a balance on the council contingency funds and the other council budget funding account?
Through Mr. Cherry, I'm just going to get that off the reserve and reserve fund report because they are forecasted to the end of the year. So in the corporate contingency reserve, there's currently $1.9 million. So that was topped up over the summer with the 2020 operating budget surplus. And sorry, Councillor Carpenter, what was the other?
The contingency fund.
Sorry, that one is the contingency. Council priorities, perhaps?
Yes, that's it. Priorities.
We're currently forecasting a balance to the end of the year of $92,000.
Yeah, that's the one that I thought was pretty much depleted. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, seeing no other questions, that brings us to the end of the meeting. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.